Welcome to Carlton's Math Corner. Today we're going to be discussing percents. To begin, please make sure you have everything ready so that you can take some great notes as well as record some vocabulary terms and sketches. Well, let's start off. Our target today is I can write a percent as a decimal. And so first of all, let's talk about what is a percent. Well, a percent is amount out of 100. As you see here, this is 78%. And notice this is a hundreds grid, so it's a 10 by 10 square. And the area within inside is 100. And 78 of the squares are shaded, and that is to represent 78%. Then below, here is 134%. We needed actually 2 of the hundreds grids because we need 100 shaded on one and we need 34 on the other. 100 plus 34 is 134%. Now, one way to remember that a percent is an amount out of 100 is kind of looking at the word percent itself. If I separate it into two parts, per and then cent, cent is actually a prefix that means 100. And so this is very critical for us because we are going to be writing percents as a decimal. And in order to do that, we need to write a percent as a fraction first. And so 56%, let's start with that example. 56% is the same as 56 shaded squares out of 100 shaded squares. Or we can just say 56 out of 100. Now, in our last video, we talked about fractions and we talked about ways to, we talked about how a fraction is basically a division problem. We changed our fractions to decimals, and so we're kind of going to do the same thing with percents. We're going to take our knowledge of 56 100ths and know that it is 56 divided by 100, and we're going to use that knowledge to change it to a decimal. And so over here I have it set up as 56 fell over into the middle. It is being divided by 100. 100 stays on the outside, that's our divisor, and when we divide we get 0.56. So 56 100ths is the same as 0.56. Let's look at another one. So 12%. What fraction would you get when you have 12%? 12% of the squares are shaded. What fraction is that? And then from that point, can you set up a division problem and figure out what is the decimal of 12%? Well, here's 12 shaded out of 100. And so now we have our division problem, 12 divided by 100. So 12 falls over into the middle. And we're going to divide it by 100. And so 100 goes into 12 0 times. So we need to add a 0 and a decimal point to show that we're adding our first 0. And so now we have 120. 100 does go into 120 because remember we're ignoring that decimal point. So it's 120 divided by 100 is 1. Then we do 1 times 100 is 100. That's multiplying. Then subtract. Remainder of 20. And because of a remainder, we drop down another 0. Now we have 200. And 100 goes in there perfectly 2 times. So 12 100ths is the same as 0.12. 123%. Or 123% is the same as 123 over 100. What that's saying is we are filling out one whole box of 100, one entire hundreds grid, plus 23 more squares of another one. And so when we divide this, look what happens. We get 1.23 because this one whole represents one whole hundreds grid, and then 0.23 represents 23 extra squares shaded on another one. How about 5.6%? What this means is we don't even have 6 boxes squared out of 100. Or squared, 6 boxes shaded. We don't even have 6. We have 5 and a little bit over a half of another box shaded. And so when we put 5.6 over 100 and we divide it, look what happens. For one, I notice that, and I'm going to actually get in this real quick because I want to show. I want you to notice that when I try to take 100 and put it into, well, first of all, 5, 100 doesn't go into 5, so I can put a 0 up there. Then I look at, well, there's a decimal point already in the problem, so I'm just going to bring that decimal point up. I'm going to keep it there. But I'm going to look, I'm going to ignore it, and now I have 56. Does 100 go into 56? No. So I have to put another 0 to show that it does not go into 56. And so what this is saying is that I am filling out less than 100 of my boxes, and in this case less than, you know, six whole boxes, because over here 0.12 represented 12 boxes. Over here 0.23 was 23 boxes out of 100 shaded. So over here 0.05, that means I have only 5 boxes shaded, and then this 6 is just a little bit more of another box. 6 thousandths or 6/10 of another box. And so when I'm looking at this, now I have 5 times 100, I get 500, and I notice a remainder of 60. Don't want a remainder, so I need to drop down another one. 100 goes into 6 and perfectly, and so 0.056. Here's what I want you to look at is, what do you notice about the decimal points? First of all, the decimal point in 12%, well, it's a whole number, so the decimal point's at the end. 123%, it's at the end as well, and then the decimal point here is right there. What did you notice about the beginning amount, and then what do you notice, what happened to the decimal point to get to your answer? So from percent to decimal, what happened to the decimal point? So when we divided by 100, how many of you noticed that when we divide by 100, really we're just moving that decimal point, oops, I need my pen. We are moving that decimal point to the left. And so now it's at 0.12. Same thing with this one. I am moving it to the left. Same thing. 1.23 now. And then this one I moved it to the left. But notice this one has an empty space. And so that is where that 0 came from. This 0 right here is that empty space. I'm filling it in with a 0. And so it's 0.056. And so when you divide by 100, that's what you're doing, is you're moving the decimal point to the left. Now let's take a look at, remember I said percents may look different. They can look as like a whole number, which we saw, 12%. They can have a decimal point in them, or here's our last type, is they can have a fraction in it. So looking at this, can you think and use your prior knowledge? What could you do with this problem so that you could change it to a decimal? Is there anything that you could do to this percent to make it look like, or to make it an easier number to work with, I should say? Yeah, those of you that said, well, I know that I can change a fractional piece to a decimal. You're right. That would be the best step to take. And so 3/4, how do we change that to a decimal? Remember, 3 falls over, 4 stays on the outside, and we divide. So let's do that. 3 falls over, 4 stays on the outside, and we get 0.75. And some of you may have already known that one because 3/4 out of 4/4 is 75 cents, so 0.75. So this box, I would put 0.75 in it. And so now I have 35 and 0.75%. So I got the decimal part. I wrote it in as a decimal, but it's still a percent. It's not an actual decimal. It's not in a decimal form until I divide by 100. So let's look at, I have 35 and 0.75%. Another way to write that is 35.75%. And now I'm gonna start where I was before. I know that a percent's per 100, so I'm gonna put it over 100. So it's 35.75 over 100. And I know that when I now have a division problem, I'm dividing by 100, and I know the decimal point moves 2 places to the left. And so I am going to move 2 places to the left, 1, 2, and I get 0.3575. So let's try a couple more problems. If I have 78 and 7/8%, I can change 7/8 to a decimal by doing 7 divided by 8. 7 divided by 8 is 0.875. And so knowing that it's 0.875, I have 0.875. I have 78 and 0.875%. So I'm going to rewrite that right here. 78 and 0.875%. And I know that a percent's out of 100, so I'm going to draw a line, and I don't want that line. So I'm going to draw a regular line, and I'm going to put it over 100. And then now I have a fraction, so I'm going to take the percent off, 78.875 over 100. And I know when I divide by 100, I move the decimal point 2 to the left. And so let's move it 2 to the left, so I get 0.78875, and that is my answer. Let's do this one. I know that 102 is going to remain the same, and we have done 2/5 before. If you take 2 divided by 5, that is the same as 0.4. And so I'm going to put 0.4%. So now I have a percent, and I'm going to change it to a fraction. So I am going to underline it, and I'm going to put it over 100 because a percent's per 100. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the decimal point. I divide by 100, and the decimal point moved. So 2 places to the left, so it's 1.024 as my answer. And lastly, this one, 45, and I know 1/3 is 0.3333 repeating. And so I'm going to put it over 100, and I'm going to divide, and I get 0.453333, etc. So tonight, will you please do these problems? Thank you so much for joining me at Carlton's Math Corner.